Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm always like, what is my bio? So today what we're going to talk about, I know last week or the week before you had a training on like media and cultural studies and film, and we will look at that a little bit because the submissions you get within the dance genre or dance academia is via video, so that definitely takes a huge portion of how you're going to be looking at things. But basically we're going to just walk through like how we recommend you go through when you see these submissions. So I know that they're probably 5 minutes and under, which, to be honest, was a bit of a red flag, I think, for me and for Irvin, especially in academic dance work and in concert dance. After students go beyond their academic endeavors in dance departments, work is never 5 minutes or under. Maybe as food for thought for later, when you're asking for submissions, thinking about, is this an excerpt of something or is this a full-length work? It is possible that you would get a full-length work from an undergrad that is 5 minutes. It's most likely a study from a class, but keeping that in mind that what you're seeing may not be the full thing. So the first step you want to do when you get a submission or you're watching a submission is just watch it. Just watch it as it is. And if you're someone who likes to take notes, jot down like what you see, what you notice, but just watch it. Then go back and figure out what information you've been given. So what's the title? If it's in English, do you understand what they're saying? If it's not in English, can you translate it? Does that matter? Because it does. And who's the choreographer? Is there more than one? Who are the performers? Is the choreography done in collaboration with the performers? And then another big important thing is music. If there is music, they should be giving you the artist, the composer, and it's also a good thing to know that if there's lyrics, I'd recommend looking those lyrics up, because often when there's lyrics, they have some kind of significance. Either the dance is made to lyrics or made in contrast of. And then look if there's any extra information that they've been given you. Do they provide what genre or style of dance? There is a multitude of genres of dance and styles. What you'll mostly, I imagine, be looking at are contemporary, modern, or postmodern. That's the main style that is studied in undergrad work. Jazz may be another one, ballet may be another one. What's great about Riverside is that there's also hip-hop department that's flourishing within the dance department. There's, with our Dance 5 classes, there are instructions in tango, ballet folklorico, improvisation, and the list goes on. And like Irvin could tell you, he is researching Cabradita, which is a
Mexican-American social dance form,
yeah. So dance is not just concert, it's not just commercial, it's also social as well. So, yes, everyone's staying with me so far? It's like I just throw a lot of information at you.
And I think it's also to be mindful of the submissions also not coming in as a crisp, clean product.
Yes.
And I think especially because they are undergrads that, even at a graduate level, to get our work filmed is a lot of money. So these are going to be submissions videotaped with their iPhones or videotaped with whatever access they have to submitting what they're going to submit as well.
Yeah, so I think be kind when you watch. If the quality the quality of the video maybe isn't as up to par as what you may see on Facebook. So being really mindful of the genre or style that you're seeing, and if you don't know, don't assume, would be my biggest advice. Either ask for that when you're getting submissions, make that a requirement, or go back and ask the artist who submitted something. So, like I said just a minute ago, what you'll probably see is a lot of concert dance. You'll see mostly documentations, like someone put up a camera and they're shooting a dance on a stage, like this. You may also get dance that is meant for the camera, which you may have covered a little bit. I feel real fancy with this thing right now. Which you may have covered a little bit with your media and cultural studies, where something like this, where it's not on a stage, it's actually in a place, and the camera work is vital to the actual performance product. Okay? I'm sure a lot of you have seen that one. It's been circling around Facebook. So, yeah, so there's a difference between commercial dance, concert dance, dance for film, which can fall under both of those, and then social dance. So thinking about the way it's documented, I think, can be really important when you look at it. So if it's a dance for film, then the quality of the videography and the camera should probably be a little bit more than if it was just documentation. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is, especially if, for both, what's the context? Okay, if it's on a stage, where is it? Is it at a university? Is it at a performance art space in downtown LA? The context of these performances matter. Is it part of a series? Is it for a university undergrad concert, like we have it here at UC Riverside? The undergrad dance students put on UCR's Dancing in the University Theater once a year. So understanding where it's happening, not just in the moment where the dance is happening, but in the larger scale of something. Or was it just a project that someone wants to submit that hasn't been showcased anywhere yet? That's also important. You probably won't get this a lot, but is this an original work that has been made specifically for this submission? Or is it has been performed before and then been revised and revamped for this submission? So that may be something that you might ask for when you're getting submissions. When was the first performance date, especially if it was something that was created in 2004 and they've redone it for the submission. So you've watched it once. Taken any notes if you feel like you need to take any notes. And it can be anything based on did that evoke anything from you? Did you notice something specific? And then after you've watched it once, go back, find out your information. All the things we just went over: choreographers, performers, genre, style. Is it documentation, dance, film? Is it a commercial something? If it's something for a concert stage, and then looking at its context. Then watch it again. With all this information, watch it again. And here's where the money, I think, happens. This is where you really get down to whether maybe this is something you want to include in your paper, is what's being represented, right? Dance is a form of representation, and bodies being still in a space is still representing something. So noticing things like gender, race, age, body type, height, this can all matter and does all matter, and they are good things to notice, but it's also important to notice these things and then look beyond them. Don't get stuck in things, especially like race and gender would be my advice. It can be easy to be it can be easy to make assumptions and conclusions just based on race and gender, and that is important to notice or to write down what you notice, or to consider what you notice, but it's also important to look at what the movement is doing, not just the body's doing the movement, but the actual movement. And as I assume all non-dancers or people who aren't familiar with dance, that can be a tricky thing to look for if you don't really know what to look for. So, the big question is what's being represented, and is it new information, right? When someone writes an academic article for an academic journal, you're not just spouting out the same stuff, right? So is this something that seems new to you? Is this a continuation of something you've seen before? Or is it just reproducing what you've already seen? Yeah? Maybe? Okay. So when you're looking at movement, there's going to be I wouldn't get too worried about like technical terms of dance movement because you're not going to know them, right? You don't necessarily know what a bama is versus a jeté versus, I don't know, like, I can't read the language. So don't get lost in any of that, but thinking about what those gestures and movements maybe evoke in you. Are they gestures that you know? Oftentimes in dance, what you'll see are what maybe you would classify as everyday movement. Or someone is miming something or doing something that you recognize. Walking is the most common one. Dancers walk all the time. Yeah, it's a big thing, especially in postmodern work. So looking at what the body is actually doing. Going beyond that is then the dynamics of a piece. Is the dynamic flat? Like when you watch a movie and you're bored because nothing changes, right? When you're watching a dance, is it sort of the same level? Or does the energy spike up and down? Yeah? And just because one is not necessarily better than the other, but what does the dynamic change or lack of changes evoke? What does that represent, right? Because a very monotone piece could be making a very poignant statement. Yeah. Then the other thing I want to you to think about is avoiding getting lost in looking for a narrative or looking for this is about this thing in very specific terms. Dance has the ability to do that. It can have a very specific narrative or storyline. If you've ever watched like Really You Can Dance, all of their contemporary pieces tend to have a clear storyline, and you know that storyline because they tell it to you in the 30-second clip before you watch it, right? You may not get that information, or you may require that. So know that if you want to know what this piece is based on, or if it's about, what it's researching, ask for that when you get submissions. But not all dance does that. It can be very abstract. A dance can be based on or research movement itself too, right? That's very legitimate and very powerful also. The great thing about dance, in my opinion, is that it lies in that spectrum of narrative, storyline, about something specific, or so abstract, I have no idea what that was, right? But the other great thing about dance is that each of you are going to get something different if you watch the same piece, right? You may have a similar opinion, you may get the same thing, but you also get very different things based on your own context of when you're watching it, your own backgrounds. All of that is a part of your viewing experience. So avoid being like, what is it about? What is it about? Because it's not necessarily about anything, right? It's not to be some like grand like revelation. It doesn't have to, yeah? Yeah, so that makes sense. That's a really important point. Don't get stuck in the narrative. I think the commercial world of dance relies on that narrative, but because we're in an academic setting, you may not get that as much. Okay. Also, it's easy to get lost in like, wow, that was so cool. Her leg was like over her head, and like she did this crazy jump, or there was this crazy lift. Great. Like dance is a physical feat, right? We are athletes just as much as we are artists. But notice it, and then dig a little deeper, right? We're scholars. It's not just about what's on the surface. So you can be looking at like what kind of training requires you to do that, what kind of partnership, if it's a partner work, is required of that. And then again, what do those cool movements represent for you with that person, with that race, that gender? What does it represent, and the easiest way to get past the sort of surface level, even if it's, that made me feel sad, that made me feel angry, that was cool. So you get to that surface level because it's an instinctual reaction, and those reactions are totally valid, but then ask yourself why. And that will circle you back around to what is being represented. So that asking yourself why, and if you can answer that, based on the gestures they're doing, the dynamic changes or lack of, the partner work, the collaborative nature, the synchronicity of movement. That all represents something. So asking yourself why can really dig deeper. And if you're not sure how to answer that, or if you can't find an answer, it doesn't mean that's not there, but it also maybe mean that work may need to dig a little bit more itself, too. The hard thing about training, I think, anyone in this kind of a thing is that it's subjective. I mean, there's no, like, right or wrong, like, way to dance, and it's hard if you don't have it can be tricky if you don't have a dance background, and then with very limited knowledge, or if you have some knowledge on, like, one genre, but there's, you know, a multitude of other ones that you can't necessarily speak towards. So I don't know if this is how you do it anyways, but multiple people may be watching the same thing, the same submission, and being able to converse about it. And if you're able to, like, have a conversation about a piece and you get into something, especially if you don't agree about it, it's probably something worth sharing with your audience, right? Your readers. If you're like, if it leaves you with nothing, maybe not. Yeah. For me as an artist, I am less concerned with people liking my work and more concerned with them leaving with something, right? They leave the space often angry, which is valid. They leave it with some kind of cathartic release. They leave it thinking about something that maybe has something to do with the work, but that my work was able to provide empathy for them. So the subjectiveness of dance and the abstractness of dance can really allow that. But if it's not executed correctly and it leaves you with nothing, then it really hasn't done its job. And that's very much my opinion on that topic. Does that make sense? Yeah? I'm like so jealous that you guys all have heat in here. It's like our studio is, I swear to God, the AC was on yesterday. It was awful. It was so cold. And I'm like, oh, it's so warm, yeah, so watch it, no information. Figure out your information, figure out the background information, gather any information you can, whether that means you do a little bit more research on the music, the artists, whatever. Then watch it again, looking for what's being represented, focusing on the movement patterns, the spatial patterns, like where they're moving in space, not just what the body is actually doing, and then, but letting, like, it come down to, does it evoke something in you? And it doesn't have to be something grand, it doesn't have to be some, like, light bulb moment, but is it providing you with something? The other thing I didn't mention when you watch it again, or even the first time, is costuming also plays an important role. At an undergrad level, there may be less of a costume budget than maybe in a professional concert dance. So does the costume add or detract something from you? But costuming definitely plays a role, especially when it comes to gendered, I think, viewings. Yeah? Okay. So we're going to watch 2 videos, but I hope I didn't ramble on for so long. The first one we're going to watch is how do I do this? Okay, we're just going to watch this one because it's so short.
The Elliot one.
Yeah. Oh, it's so pixely. Can I HD this? Hold on. Is there an HD option?
Yes, in the settings.
Can I get, like, a little bit more background too about, because I mean she tried to explain it to me, but I guess what is being produced type of thing?
Being produced?
Like,
What is
Yeah.
Audeamus?
Oh, what is Audeamus? Oh, okay.
Yes.
I was like, wait, what are you producing?
Basically, it's kind of a 2-part deal. One, we have the digital portion of it, which is the website and so on, and secondly, related to it is the physical artifact, which is the journal itself.
Nice.
We're currently working on the mechanics of how we're going to tie the two into one particular bundle,
Cool.
but those are currently the 2 branches that we're working on presently.
Nice, for sure. And this is like a startup one, right?
Hmm?
This is like a startup one, right? So this will be like the first year that.
No.
No?
No.
This is the first
This
year.
is
This is
Ah.
the
Wow, it's been a while.
but this is the first year we're going digital.
Gotcha. And because you guys are going digital, that is allowing for room of like video submissions regarding dance, right?
Correct.
Gotcha.
Which is awesome, by the way,
Yeah.
that you're able to do this.
And so what is the? Oh, you sure?
No,
Oh, okay.
I'm just messing up.
What's the desire, I guess, to include dance as part of it too?
Part of our goal as a project is to provide a foundation for interdisciplinary practice,
Nice.
which is why originally we started off just with like poetry and things like scientific papers, non-scientific papers, sociological, and so on.
Nice.
So we figured that this would be a perfect opportunity.
Vocabulary that is palatable to a
Stereotypes.
mainstream audience.
Yeah.
Right.
Often evoking a lot of stereotypes, gender and racially.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this video that we're about to watch is more so commercial dance,
Yes.
which is also valid too,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of labor required into actually making it and producing
Mhm.
it. So I guess in that sense, that's why I was asking. I mean, it's an inclusion of all kinds of dance, right? Or what sort of area you want to gear that section of your guys' online journal towards.
Yeah.
If it's more so towards a scholarly intervention of producing dance that sort of goes against mainstream culture, or if it's also inclusive of things that are mainstream as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's something for you guys to decide. Yeah, question.
As far as okay, so what it was is that since we were reproducing anything, when we were advertising to students, some of them brought up wanting to submit things like dance. So that's why we expanded to it. So I kind of feel like a lot of the people who asked me were intending to do something that maybe wasn't necessarily very abstract. Like they were kind of trying to model things on things they'd seen, and so people are watching the music videos,
Right.
and they're doing that. So I don't know.
Yeah, and that, I mean, and again, it's valid, like that, there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong. I mean, like, I remember growing up and watching MTV music videos, like, on a Saturday morning, like, that's what I did, that's how I learned all the NSYNC dances. But you are an academic journal, right? You know, so I think including commercial dance work is great because you can have an academic conversation about what's being produced, and someone can produce something that is commercial, quote unquote, and still maybe like go against a mainstream idea. You know, that it's not totally unheard of that could happen. I would say encourage your students who are submitting, or if you have like a blurb about like, maybe here's some criteria, not just like it needs to be 5 minutes and under, it needs to like do X, Y, and Z, but you know, we're looking for thought-provoking investigative work. And that can come in the form of a music video, or you know, something that may be, or hip-hop. Like I think people associate hip-hop with commercial, and that's not necessarily true, or they associate modern dance with just academic or concert dance, but and like those stereotypes exist for a reason, I guess, but I would encourage the way you approach or way you advertise for submissions to be, we're looking for work that is thought-provoking and maybe asks a question, or maybe it is just for fun. Like, that's valid too. So I wouldn't limit yourself to like one thing, but understanding that dance does fall into this spectrum, and that you can get submissions within these spectrums, and you can always ask questions or about work, and you can always problematize everything, right? Everything, nothing's gonna be perfect with a bow. Like, that's boring, right? Things should be asking questions or causing you something to be unsettled about. Like, that's good art, right? That's why we make art, right? It's a protest, or it's a statement, or it is a social engagement that is fun. It's cathartic. It's disheartening. You know, art definitely reveals a lot. So I wouldn't discourage students who are submitting to not do work that they enjoy, but to encourage them not to just replicate. That was how that whole tangent was aiming for. Don't just replicate. Took me a while to get there, but I got there. Yeah?
Yeah, and I guess that's why I was asking in terms of like the overall vision of the journal, because like if you have a submission sort of theorizing upon, I don't know, the queer aspects of Moby Dick, and then you have a video that kind of has a romantic pas de deux between a man and a woman, and the man is doing all the lifting and the woman is just, you know, being a presented object, then you kind of have two different things happening at once too, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Video time.
Yes, so we're gonna watch this video. For the sake of time, so we can get to the other one also. This is I believe it's just an excerpt. So it's Elliot Moss's Without the Lights, and that's the song title. And that's the title that they've given the dance piece, which for me gives me all the cringe. But it's not all about me, so it's okay. I mean, it should be, but it's not.
Watch your churches go out one at a time. The world gets darker every night, 'cause I see it all without the lights. She walks away into the sea. Baby, take me with you, please. I don't know what I'd do if you leave. She walks away into the sea. Baby, take me with you, please. I don't know what I'd do if you leave.
But this is like the excerpt that they... So, what'd you notice? Anything. It can be super simple.
It seemed really gimmicky.
Gimmicky? Yes. What else?
They're playing with the connections between the two people.
Connections between the two people, yes.
So,
yeah, it's a good
emphasis on entwining and entrapment.
Entwining and entrapment. That's great. That's good. Yeah.
It had a very specific narrative.
Specific narrative. Yes. I saw a hand over here, yeah.
I was gonna say, like, there's like a lot of interesting things. I saw like the cat's Creole thing, but it was so fast I didn't like get a chance to like really look at it.
Right.
So it was like hard to enjoy, I guess, or not like I was enjoying it, but
Mhm.
it was hard to like examine closely.
Right.
It seemed like they did that a lot. Like it seemed like there was a lot, like, let's do some really cool moves and let's pack them in as much as possible so that
Yeah.
like you can't appreciate those moves for what they are because there's so many of them.
Exactly.
Where it kind of feels like it could have like slowed that down a little bit, make it a little bit less, ooh, this is cool and flashy, and kind of make it work better with the narrative. And that's why I said it seems kind of gimmicky in a lot of
Yeah.
places.
Yeah. And that can be part of the problem with a short amount of, I mean, it's obviously like, it's like 2 minutes, 20 seconds or something like that. And even 5 minutes is so short for a dancer too. So that's a really good thing to notice, that if you have something that's 5 minutes, that's not enough time to say anything, right? So very specific narrative. What's the narrative?
It's like domestic abuse.
Domestic abuse. Right, it's obvious. Now.
Or drug addiction.
Or drug addiction, right?
He's the drug.
And he's the drug, yeah. What do you notice with the costuming from the beginning towards the end? Like, think about the trajectory of the costuming.
The male seemed very static.
Static?
Black, leather, also constantly on. There was never really much change in whether he was disrobed, whereas the woman in the picture first started off as white, transitioned into a scene where it actually inverted the color scheme of white and black.
Mm-hmm.
Her dress was turned into something black, more like pop punk, from the simple dress that she had before, and then eventually she's just slowly being dismantled and disrobed. What are you looking at me like that for?
Yeah.
Dare you call that pop punk?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Millennials,
Like-
Jesus.
Exactly. She is disrobed. It's a hyper-sexualization of the female, which is so common in commercial work. Women are always in booty shorts. They do their beloved crotch shots. Basically, the leg is in the air, and all you see is the crotch. Because everybody loves a good crotch shot, apparently. No one's looking at the leg that's extended and all the technique that it takes to do that. They're looking at the crotch, right? She's in a bra. He's fully covered, right? So this, to me, is just reproducing.
Yeah, and then the narrative is like fed to us, and it's fed to us at using vocabulary that is like known, right? So
Yeah.
I'm gonna choke her, right? I'm gonna like,
Those gestures
slap
that
her
you
around,
see.
and so it's.
But somehow it becomes okay in this because, oh, it's cool.
Yeah,
Like,
so
they do
that,
these cool movements,
Right.
which is not the point of it.
and then
Right.
there's that dual side too of watching it, and you're just like, oh well, this is awesome too because it's sort of visibilizing domestic abuse, right? But it does so by reifying and
Yes.
sort of repeating a cycle of domestic abuse.
Right. You're
at
just
a
saying that it's
performative
there. Like it's yes, we have to state that it's there. Put it out there. But then what? Right? Obviously this is an excerpt, you know. So for all we know, she gets her revenge in the end or something, or like it resolves maybe, or she dies probably. Let's be real. That's probably like what the ending of the story is. You know? We know that story. So ask your students who are submitting, what else? You know, change the narrative. If you want a narrative, change the narrative. Right? That's what, you know. Yes, it's there. Now what? There's something else I was gonna say. And it's easy to look past the narrative and be like, look at all that amazing partner work that like they were doing all these crazy things that probably took hours of labor to figure out. Right? That's valid. But when the narrative is, I'm gonna kill you, like why?
Seems like it could have been a little bit simpler, like a little bit more raw. Because like I thought, like one of the better parts was when she's thrashing around and he kind of stops and chokes her. Like that was simpler. It was raw. I felt more from that than I did just them doing really cool moves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was a dynamic change. So for you had this like, okay, you're doing a lot of stuff, but it's like getting lost because I don't really know what's happening. This is something that I recognize. I can empathize with that. So what can you empathize with? That's sort of good thing to keep in mind when you're watching something. And you may not always be able to. Like, it's fine. Yes?
Earlier in the quarter, a different guest speaker talking on a different topic, but I'm wondering if it applies. They were saying there's only so many stories that you can tell as a fiction person. Do you think that applies to dance, and how should that affect our view of it?
That's a good question. There are only so many stories you can tell, I guess. Like, we all know there's, like, the romance. Like, there's always romance. There's always horror. There's always mystery. But I think that in dance, you can find different ways of telling them. You also don't have to tell a story in dance. And there's something... I mean, I can't speak to other art forms besides dance necessarily, but you have someone physically in front of you, whether virtually or you actually are, I guess in your case virtually, that you can follow. So, you know, are you witnessing a story from their perspective? Is it, you know, your perspective hold on. Yeah, are you witnessing it from their perspective? Are you placing your own context onto what you're seeing? Like for me, like when I read a book, I am less worried about, I could eat my own words here, like what my context is and like who I am. I'm more worried about the characters that I'm reading about. But when you're watching something, you're carrying with you. For me, when I watch things, I carry with me myself also. You know, not that you can't also sort of remove yourself, you know, and then get lost in what you're viewing. That was not really an answer to your question. What do you think? Like,
can you repeat the question? You said if there was only so many stories that can be told in dance.
I said that I was told by another speaker about a different genre that there were only so many stories, and I wondered how that applied to dance.
I think there's a variety of different stories, especially when dance opens itself up to including other voices, right? But
yes.
I think it's also, in regards to like at least watching this video, there's many different ways to tell a story too.
Yeah.
But when you repeat the cycle of representing the same way of telling that story,
Yes.
then that's when I think it's just like, well, why, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen this duet a million thousand times, or at least I have. And so it's just like, why, right? So why are we gonna like put another woman and choke her, and that's gonna say that that's domestic abuse? Well, what is that actually making us think? It's just like, oh, okay, like domestic abuse exists, and it's just like, well, how do we get past that to actually do something about it, right?
It's a tricky question. Like, I get what you're asking, and part of me is like, well, yeah, there are like, you know, only so many stories, but almost like, no, like we each have our own individual stories. Like my story is different than yours, which is different than yours, and different than yours. And dance has the ability to reveal those personal narratives, not just in a very general bubble-like context like this one maybe does. As a thinker, I don't know if that's really helpful or not, but that's I think the best answer we can give you for that. It's a good thing to keep in mind though, like, is this a story that I already know? Yes or no? If yes, is there something different about it? Maybe it would be a way to approach it. So, commercial, reinforcing the norm, and normalizing sexual abuse. So the next thing we're going to watch is a recent piece that Irvin and I were actually both in. We premiered this last year at Riverside. No, sorry, not Riverside. At Cal State LA for the American College Dance Association Festival. And then we're lucky enough to take it to the National Festival. So this is just, again, an excerpt. So this piece is roughly 10 minutes long, and that's probably a really good amount of time for an undergrad if they like wanted to give a little bit more depth to a piece. 8 to 10 minutes is pretty good. So if you're ever considering maybe going a little bit longer than 5 minutes, 8 to 10, maybe 12. But I'm like a durational artist, so I'm like, give me an hour. So, but like, no, is that time for that? I touched something. Okay. So we're about 3.5 minutes in. We'll play for it about 4 or 5 minutes.
Dramatically.
Okay, so that's a middle excerpt of that piece. Thoughts?
You guys can say you hated it.
It's okay.
It's
We
okay.
already got our award, so we're good. Even it's like, what did you notice? It can be anything. Humor. So there was laughter. Yes.
More like, because I didn't understand what was going on, like the audience was laughing and I'm like, why?
Mm-hmm.
So as like an outsider, I guess, I was like, there's something going on that I clearly don't know
Right.
about.
Yeah, and that I think was part of the reason I did an excerpt in the middle instead of starting it from the beginning is that if you get an excerpt, that might happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like there might be an audience. I mean, humor is not often done in dance, but it definitely is possible, but that can be the problem if you get an excerpt that you're like, you don't have all the information. So that's a good observation because that's what I wanted to get. Yes.
It almost seemed like you were really, like, the people up there were really gracefully kind of tripping each other up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I kind of noticed that there were a few movements that seemed to like cannibalize from like hip hop and like J-pop kind of
Okay.
dances.
Yeah.
And also how like distantly connected the dancers seemed to be, like their movements were predicated on movements of someone who was completely off from them.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That was a great observation.
also, there seem to be kind of a reversal of gender roles within the movements.
Ding, 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 we have a winner. Yeah, that was a big thing for us in this, or it was a big thing for me in this piece, as being the only female, is that I was like, not gonna lift me. I'm not gonna be your object. I'm gonna do all the heavy lifting. Except for the time I was on your back and you did push up. But yeah, so a reversal of gender roles, like, that is a new thing. It's not a new thing, but like, it's different from the norm, right?
Yeah.
But it's more than just a reversal of the gender roles. It's a collaborative experiment, which you sort of touched on too. Like, oh, you're all related, but you're all also like tripping each other up in a weird way, which probably provides some of the humor that maybe you don't have, or don't know why. There's something else I was gonna say.
That even like to this day, like in a lot of the dances that we go see and even partake in for the festival that we were in for this, women don't lift.
Yeah.
And
so
it's because I mean for the longest time I think especially in ballet, women have always been lifted, and so to sort of go against that is still pretty like brand new.
Yeah, it's pretty
but
rebellious.
it's still like it's just like interesting to me because I mean even in teaching my dance 5 courses for this quarter, I'll be like, okay, we're gonna need to add a lift here, and then the girls will automatically be like, okay, we need a guy, and they're like, I'm like, no, I taught you guys week 5 how to lift, so sort of going against that norm of only men having to lift.
Yes, so definitely a reversal of the gender roles. I think watching the whole piece, if you were able to watch the whole piece, it also comments on our stereotypes as individuals. We do this little moment, we go like this, which our friend Huen, who's lip singing to me, he was like, this is what I do, I'm Asian, right? That's what people think of me when they look at me. They think of, I'm an Asian, right? They don't care that I'm Korean, I'm just Asian, right? Like later at the end, I like unzip my pants because they don't make pants that are like proportional to my body, and it's so tight, you know? Like we do this like very brief moment that you probably wouldn't recognize it, but a selfie.
Yeah, no,
yeah. Oh, you all got it. Okay, great.
Yeah.
It's still relevant. Our work is still relevant. But you know, so we were like,
Just wait a couple months.
right? You know.
Then you incoming
So it's like these little things, like, oh, I recognize those gestures. Like that means something, that represents something, right? So we here they are. Like we understand that we as bodies, specific bodies, as women or men of color, like we have our own representations just by standing still. But we're not gonna let you just do that. We're not gonna let you just place that on to us. We're gonna offer you something more. We're gonna offer you a little humor. We're gonna offer you music that's live. You know, we're gonna offer you commentary. We're gonna offer you a break of that performative atmosphere where Fonzie goes in and like puts water on his feet because he's slipping. You know, we talk to each other. You know, so this I would say is probably the other end of the extreme where there's not a narrative, right, at all. Kind of just like, I mean, we had about 4 rehearsals to put this thing together, like that, and people were like, how can we just be ourselves and make something together, and there's no narrative, but we're still saying something, right, and different people get different things out of that, whereas the first one had a very specific narrative, but it was just something that we've already heard, yeah? Any other thoughts, or? The last thing I'll say is that if you watch something, you're like, I don't know what the F that was. Start by describing. Like, use some descriptive words. Like, it was graceful. It was, they were struggling. I could see the labor. They were very angular. Like, it's a good place to start, always, and then go from there. And then start asking yourself, okay, you know, what did that represent? You know, why did that make you feel that way? But just describing the actual movement can be a good way to start if you feel stuck, too. That's what I tell my Dance 5 students. Yeah, so we've got 5 minutes left. Are there any other questions? Yes, please.
Do you mind if I ask you a question related to the example videos that we were sent?
Please.
So I noticed in the second one, the one with Charlie Chaplin, that it seemed like there were certain gestures associated with concepts like the dictator.
Yes.
That were embodied in like the guy's legs.
Yes.
Is that a common practice in dance to have like certain concepts embodied within specific movements or specific abstract parts of the body?
Yeah, I mean, it's called, I think the word in choreographic terms is called transposing. So like, this is a Hitler